Good morning, dear students. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we will take up part 7 of As You Like It. In this series of lectures, we will discuss especially Act 4, Scene First. In this scene, we find Jakes and Rosalind confronting each other for the first time. Jakes praises the joys of the melancholy life. He very carefully defines melancholy to Rosalind. However, he finds that Rosalind is not at all impressed. Jakes' insistence on detail is amusing and revealing his character. Jakes speaks, I have neither the soldier's melancholy, which is emulation, nor the musician's, which is fantastical, nor the courtier's, which is proud, nor the soldier's, which is ambitious, nor the lawyer's, which is politic, nor the lady's, which is nice, nor the lover's, which is all these, but is a melancholy of mine own, compounded of many samples, extracted from many objects, and indeed the sundry contemplation of my travels, which by often rumination wraps me in a most humorous sadness. But here Rosalind interrupts him with a jest about his travels and his sad nature. The conversation is interrupted by Orlando, who is received coolly by Rosalind, that is Ganymede. Orlando protests that he is only within an hour of the time of their appointment. Rosalind replies that an hour to lovers is the equal of an ordinary lifetime. After Orlando has been properly rebuked for his carelessness, he starts wooing Rosalind as planned. Unwittingly, he is addressing in Ganymede the real object of his love. When Orlando vows that he would willingly die for love, he is answered with another of Rosalind's long, mocking speeches. She is humorously ironic about the possibility of man's dying for love, saying men had died from time to time and worms have eaten them, but not for love. Rosalind's bantering tone continues as she asks Celia to play the priest and marry Orlando and Ganymede in a mock ceremony. They exchange the proper vows, and the procedure inspires Rosalind to make ironic comments. Rosalind insists on honest affection rather than meaningless exaggerations. Ganymede describes what life with Rosalind would be like. Rosalind cautions Orlando to think twice before marrying, lest he should find that his honor is betrayed. She says unkind about woman's nature and indicates that none of the sex is immune from these bad habits. Now, scene second of Act 4. This is an extremely brief scene. It depicts Jakes and the other members of the banished Duke's court. They are returning from a successful hunt with a stag and make appropriate celebrations. There are jokes about who shall wear the deer's horns. There is also a song which is a thinly disguised statement on cuckoldry. Now, scene third, Rosalind and Celia again open the scene. Soon after its beginning, Orlando enters. Sylvius too comes soon. According to his promise to Phoebe, he is delivering her letter to Rosalind. Means Phoebe's letter to Rosalind. Rosalind is a little annoyed by the letter and by Sylvius' meekness. She mocks Phoebe's expression of love towards her. After Sylvius leaves, leaves, Oliver unexpectedly comes. He is looking for the residence of Ganymede and Helena. Dear students, Ganymede is disguised. Who is Ganymede? Ganymede is Rosalind. Means Rosalind disguised as Ganymede, and Helena is who? Celia. Celia as Helena. He announces that Orlando has been injured by a lioness while trying to save Oliver's life. He produces a blood-stained handkerchief as proof of his statement. Oliver describes in detail how he was rescued by Orlando. He is submissive when Celia describes Oliver as unnatural. Oliver now regrets his harsh treatment of his younger brother. Oliver makes it clear that Orlando has not been seriously wounded, but Rosalind faints at the sight of the blood-stained handkerchief. Upon her recovery, Oliver questions Ganymede why she showed so much emotion. Rosalind answers evasively. Soon Celia draws her off to rest in their cottage. With this, Act 4 gets over. Now let's take a Act 5, Scene first. The fifth act begins on a comic note. Touchstone continues his impetuous wooing of gentle Audrey. Audrey is apparently somewhat annoyed at the sudden end of their marriage plans. She regarded Oliver Martext to be good enough for her. She wonders what has happened to Touchstone's matrimonial ideas. They are soon joined by a country young man named William. This young man has been in love with Audrey. He soon becomes the butt of Touchstone's wit. William has little hope of prevailing against Touchstone's sophisticated tongue. When faced with poison, the bastinado or steel as alternatives to his leaving, he most prudently decides to leave. After William's dismissal, Audrey and Touchstone are again left alone. However, their privacy is only of momentary duration. Soon after William's departure, Corin enters. He informs that Ganymede and Helena request their company in another part of the forest. Scene second of Act 5. The scene is still in the forest of Arden. The characters, however, have changed. We see Orlando and Oliver discussing a new development in the plot. Oliver has fallen instantly in love with Helena, that is Celia. He has resolved to give over all his property and lands to Orlando. He says that he will spend the rest of his life as a shepherd in the forest of Arden, dedicating himself to the simple life and to his love for Helena. Orlando is understandably incredulous. Is it possible that on so little acquaintance you should like her? That but seeing you should love her, and loving woo, and wooing she should grant, and will you preserve to enjoy her. After Oliver has announced his intention to Orlando and received his brothers, they are interrupted by Rosalind's entrance. Rosalind and Orlando exchange dialogue which is appropriate to the role of courtly love that they have been acting out. Rosalind speaks. Oh, my dear Orlando, how it grieves me to see thee wear thy heart in a scarf. Orlando, it's my arm. Rosalind, I thought thy heart had been wounded with the claws of a lion. Then Orlando, wounded it is, but with the eyes of a lady. In this dialogue, both the characters, or Rosalind and Orlando, choose to express themselves with the courtly exaggeration of Elizabethan lovers. Only a little while ago, Rosalind was heard mocking the idea that lovers might die for love. Now she chooses to speak of wounded hearts and to accept the pretty conceit that Orlando's wound comes not from the claws of a lion but from fair Rosalind's eyes. Perhaps Rosalind's mockery has been modified by Celia's sudden love for Oliver. At any rate, she discusses this romance with Orlando at some length. She expresses surprise at the suddenness of the passion, but she accepts its strength. Orlando informs her that Oliver and Celia are to marry the next day. He uses this as an occasion to express his own misery. He is no longer content to imagine that Ganymede is Rosalind. He wishes to find his real love just as Oliver has done. After hearing Orlando's laments about his own unhappiness in contrast to Oliver and Celia's joy, Rosalind as Ganymede makes a sudden prediction. Now, Rosalind predicts, believe then, if you please, that I can do strange things. I have, since I was 3 years old, conversed with a magician most profound in his art and yet not damnable. If you do love Rosalind so near the heart as your gesture cries it out when your brother marries Elena, shall you marry her? I know into what strait of fortune she is driven, and it is not impossible to me, if it appear not inconvenient to you, to set her before your eyes tomorrow human as she is and without any danger. Orlando is understandably surprised, but he is willing to accept the prediction since it satisfies his longings. Just after Rosalind's encouraging promise to Orlando, Sylvius and Phoebe enter the scene. Phoebe protests to Ganymede, accusing him of treating her ungently. Rosalind answers her as brusquely as before, indicating that she does so for Phoebe's own benefit rather than for the sake of being unpleasant. The four speak of their thoroughly confusing emotion. The scene becomes a kind of love chant. Finally, Rosalind rebels, comparing their noise to the howling of Irish wolves against the moon. As the scene concludes, she takes the situation in hand, commanding Phoebe and Sylvius to meet her at the same place tomorrow. Everybody promises to do the bidding of this magical Ganymede. The scene ends on a note of confused hilarity, which promises to become rapidly resolved. Thank you. Have a nice day.